The first presentation we have is a panel discussion. It's titled 5G in Defence More Than Smartphones. And first up, we have Jonathan Cole, Director of BT Defence. He is the BT Defence Director, operating as part of the BT enterprise. He leads the profit and loss account, which includes business development, sales, major bids, service operations, and contract management. His business unit currently provides services to the Ministry of Defence through Defence Fixed Telecommunication Systems and Integrated User Services, and some other contracts that are crucial to Defence's role. Prior to joining BT, he spent 35 years in the British Army, culminating as Major General at the Army's Director for Information, which included being Chief Information Officer at board level. So he also holds the honours of CB and OBE for his services. So if you'd like to welcome to the stage, please, Jonathan Cole.
Thanks, Alex.
Next up, we have Lou Walker, Senior Portfolio Architect at BT. Lou Walker is an experienced mobile network architect leading BT's development of 5G private networks technology solutions. Lou has a long career in telecommunications with 14 years in the British Army and over 20 years of commercial mobile network providers. So, yeah, if you'd like to welcome Lou to the stage, please. So the way this is going to work is we're essentially just going to have a little discussion, a little panel discussion. There'll be some questions flooding in from the app that I have on my iPad as well. Feel free to ask to log those questions into the app yourself through Brella, and I'll read them at the end. The microphone will come round. Hopefully, we've got someone that has a mic that can give it to you, so you can ask a question if you want from the audience. And so let's go. Let's begin. So, exactly what do you mean, Lou, by more than smartphones?
More than smartphones. So let's think about 5G or mobile networks in general. Everybody's familiar with the kind of journey from 3G to 4G to 5G. When we think about 3G and 4G networks, we primarily think about mobile broadband or enhanced mobile broadband. And those networks have been primarily developed to serve consumers. So we're all familiar with handsets and tablets and connecting to our laptops to give us access to broadband, as well as the normal kind of voice, text, and MMS services. And the development of 3G and 4G has been largely about that, and particularly the development of the standards, and it's all been driven in that direction. 5G signals a new change in direction in terms of the development of these access technologies. So 3GPP is the body that globally defines the standards and the features that we develop on these new technologies. And with 5G, it was focused at much more than consumer. There's been a lot of development in use cases or features and functionality that support use cases for industry and other verticals that are not your traditional kind of consumer verticals. So we see, interestingly, we see new bodies coming up, like 5GAA is a 5G Automobile Association. So they've created their own 5G body to feed into 3GPP and say, look, this is what we want from this technology for the automobile industry. And we've got 5G ACIA, which is looking at the manufacturing industry. And they are, for the first time, directly feeding into the 3GPP standards and saying, this is what we want you to develop. So as a result of that, with release 15 and particularly release 16, we see lots of new features like support for time-sensitive networks, which has always been classically an Ethernet standard, never wireless. 5G is the first technology where we've been able to do time-sensitive networking on wireless, for instance. So I think the key point is 5G is much more about consumer. It's about things. It's about connecting machine to machine. It's about running or giving the capability to run AI platforms, ML, all these types of services over a wireless technology in support of different verticals.
Thank you, thank you. And just in regards to how you're using 5G in regards to the Ministry of Defence, for John, if you could just sort of tell us exactly how that applies to defence.
Yeah, so, picking up on, first of all, it's great to be here and fantastic. And it's a real privilege to have a chance to speak here on behalf of BT Defence. Picking up on Lou's observation there, BT's vision is to be the world's most trusted connector of people and machines. So it is trying to move on absolutely to doing that. And we can then look at how we can apply that to our defence account. So at the moment, BT Defence provides those two main contracts you described, the DFTS and the IUS contracts, which are the connectivity, the communications layer, broadly speaking, over fibre and copper with a bit of Wi-Fi at the edge. And there's a real recognition that we need to go beyond that. We through our mobile services arm, EE, of course, we provide the 4G as well, and a lot of the mobile users in defence are using that for their tablets and phones and so forth. But what we now need to recognise is that our customers in defence, in a whole range of use cases, need to go beyond the connection of the people to those devices. Now, what's fascinating about defence as a customer is that they have verticals within it. So I look across my colleagues across BT who might work for ports and borders. So, for example, we're working with Belfast Harbour to create private 5G there. Well, defence also has its own ports. It's got Portsmouth Military Dockyard, for example. And the list goes on. Hospitals, defence has hospitals. Education, defence has colleges. So we can look at all those verticals and see how we can build out beyond that level of connectivity through the services we've provided thus far.
Thank you. And Lou, in regards to 5G private networks, can you just explain exactly what they are and how they'll be used?
Yeah, okay. So 5G private networks are essentially a scaled-down version of a 5G public mobile network. And it's important to understand, certainly where we are today with the development of 5G private networks, they are isolated networks. So they don't have a relationship with a public mobile network. And that allows us to deploy 5G private networks in lots of different scenarios where a customer wants full control of their network. So, a public network is designed in a certain way to serve the public, and it provides a certain level of service, and that's set. With a 5G private network, the customer can now start to set how that mobile network runs. It can start to set different levels of quality of service depending on its use case. And importantly, it's more secure because it can be completely self-contained within an environment. The data, so a lot of manufacturing companies, for instance, don't want their data to leave their sites. So the data can be completely self-contained, and we can provide this secure connectivity layer that brings low latency, high throughput, and is highly configurable, and also can provide a unified connectivity platform. So that's really the power of 5G private networks.
Thanks, that's brilliant. And in regards to some of the sort of new features that will enhance 5G, could you just sort of elaborate on kind of, it says key new features here on this question, so I wonder if you can sort of elaborate on what they might be.
Okay, so right now all our main vendors are developing technology based on Release 16 standards. So I mentioned time-sensitive networks and time-sensitive networking. There's things like high accuracy indoor positioning, vehicle to X, as well as ultra-low latency, ultra reliability and low latency communications. In Release 17, which is just getting tied down now, and we will see this technology flowing through in the next 12 to 24 months. One of the main focuses is on massive machine type connectivity. So, up to 1 million devices per square kilometre. Now that sounds like a lot of devices in a square kilometre, but if you imagine in the centre of London, for instance, a square kilometre and lots of vertical buildings, high occupancy, that million number all of a sudden doesn't seem so high. So, so that's the focus. And also, I think one of the main things to come out of Release 17 is what used to be called 5G New Radio Lite, which is now called RedCap, Reduced Capability. And that's about developing devices that are much cheaper and just fit for a set purpose. So, your standard handset today is a really powerful device. It has a really powerful chipset which supports lots of different frequencies and lots of different functionality, but it's expensive. If you're in that kind of IoT world, you want your chipsets to be as cheap as possible. Now, we already have NB-IoT and we have some pretty low-cost devices there, but there are plenty of IoT use cases that demand more performance and more data than an NB-IoT. So RedCap is designed to kind of fit in that middle space between a kind of full-blown device and chipset and in between NB-IoT. And then finally, Release 18, we've got a view of, that's really all about AI and ML, so artificial intelligence and machine learning, and particularly focused at the actual network and improving the network and making it more intelligent.
Thank you. I think we're going to have quite a few questions regarding what you've just spoken about there, but we'll get round to them at the end of the session. But just moving on to just the defence applications. John, in terms of over the next sort of 3 years or so, what kind of things can we expect, or what will you be working with, essentially?
So I think everything that's growing out of the world of IoT, defence needs to pick up on. And the way that we're trying to do that is to go straight to those end users. We've developed 3 areas for proofs of concept. One with each of the services. There's a healthy competition between Army, Navy and Air Force, and we're allowing each one of them to kind of demonstrate with end users what their opportunities could be. So at Royal Air Force Brize Norton, which is effectively an airport where they have passengers come in, they have freight come and go. It's got so many parallels to what goes on at Heathrow. So for example, they're looking at how they can automate passenger handling and how they can track the data of throughput of people, whether it's pilots making sure the crews are optimized so that they can turn aircraft around quickly. Loads of parallels they can use by throwing IoT sensors all over that and then pulling data insight from it. Another example I mentioned earlier, Portsmouth Dockyard. So again, what is it that they need in Portsmouth Dockyard? Accurate location is really important, but also surveillance. So for example, they can fly drones around the camp in order to look at, for example, degradation of the walls where saltwater might be ingressing. They can do inspections of roofs. They can do inspections of ships when they're there, and of course provide sort of physical security as well through the use of drones on that base, all networked through private 5G where possible. And for the Army, we've gone to one of their bases, a place called Lark Hill up on Salisbury Plain, where again they're looking at where they can just throw all sorts of different devices. But the most important message out of what we're doing with them is that we might find that, say, 80% of what we provide as the pattern for any one of those is reusable for others. But the end users need to turn that into something, and that's probably the extra 20%, which actually is probably is probably far more value than 20%. But that's where their kind of differences come, because the dockyard commander in Portsmouth will say, well, we're not quite the same as the Port of Tyne or the Port of Belfast. We do have some differences. So it's those end users who really know how to do it, because we don't know. All we're doing is showing them this is what we think is about 80% accurate. You now refine this through use cases, and then we can start introducing the new technologies and laying them on top of the 5G, surveillance, IoT devices, managed print, data analytics, all of that. We're starting to build a stack on top.
We've got a question regarding the future coming up for both of you, but before we get to that, just one final one from the panel. And this is for Lou. 5G network slicing. how is this? How can this help the maritime sector on the nautical theme of talking about Portsmouth? Yeah, if you could just elaborate on the network slicing element of things.
Okay, so I want to talk about 5G network slicing on two types of networks. So we mentioned private networks and we mentioned public networks. So there's a lot of excitement about network slicing within the public network. And what network slicing allows us to do is to develop essentially a defined quality of service and a defined performance in a slice on the network that we can offer to specific customers and specific use cases. So that slice will be optimized to the use case that's being delivered. So if it's a video analytics type use case, there are ways that we configure the radio access network and the transport network and the core network to work optimally with video streaming, for instance, versus we would with standard kind of mobile broadband or voice. So it does allow us to create those optimized slices in the network. I think it's important to note with public mobile networks, these slices will be available for whoever has those types of use cases. So there still will be some competition in terms of contention in the network. Whereas with private networks, we can create our own slices. And I think the big differences with private networks is the customer can define exactly what those slices are like. The MNO will still define the slices for the public mobile network based on the common use cases. Whereas if you have specialized use cases and, as John was saying, the customer, that last 20%, where they have specialized use cases on a private network, they can have their slice optimized to exactly what they're doing. And also, another really important thing is it's a dedicated network for that customer, so they're not in contention with anybody else.
Thank you very much. So this leads us on to a first question actually from this coming from our app. So it's talking about associations and the fact that we're going to be hearing today from Colin Wilcock at the 6G Infrastructure Association. And the question is, are we ready for the 6G discussion? And is it mentioned in defence? So I guess we can start with defence and maybe we can move on to wider applications.
So in defence amongst the user community, and for me in my kind of commercial facing role, to be frank, it's not in the conversation. Quite frankly, we are trying to help defence understand the shift from 4G people connection through to 5G device connection. But that doesn't mean that they don't have people who do work on it. So there is the Defence Science and Technology Laboratories, DSTL, where they are working on all the future concepts as well, rather than things that are ready for market now. Same in BT. BT Technology up at Adastral Park, our research and development centre, they will also be looking at 6G work up there.
Because I understand that we're really only kind of scratching the surface of 5G anyway, aren't we? So it's going to be quite a long way off, I'd imagine.
Yeah, but I don't think that means that work shouldn't be starting on it now. And I think there needs to be parallel activity rather than sequential activity. But in terms of the market-facing, customer-facing activities at the moment, from my perspective, it's very much 5G. And Lou, I'm not sure what observations you may have of any sort of 6G work that's going on in BT.
I think exactly as you said, it's very much a kind of R&D activity right now. In terms of, my focus is on kind of commercialization and delivering products in the next, from now, to a 3-year kind of time span. So 6G is definitely not in that time window.
And I guess those R&D discussions are not privy to public sort of discourse at the moment. I mean, we can speculate, I suppose, which is fun to do, but it's difficult to make any fixed predictions, I suppose, on what it's capable of doing. 1 second, I'm just going to get the old refresh my app. Okay. The irony of the editor of the technology portfolio. The technology's not working.
Yeah, well, just while you're doing that, I mean, I have no doubt that, BT Technology, I mean, we're probably not the right people to represent what some of the R&D people are doing in Adastral Park here, but I have no doubt that they are connected with those association bodies.
So just in regards, while I try and fix this, do we have any questions from the audience in regards to what we've heard so far? I was thinking maybe unless you're sitting right at the back.
You might just want to repeat the question once he's asked it.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you. Yeah, so I mean, we've talked about lots of use cases, and we're going to hear about lots of 5G use cases. You mentioned ports and a few others. I just wanted to delve into your personal interest, really. Is there any specific use case that you're involved in at the moment? Any wins, any exciting 5G stuff going on that you're kind of excited about? So maybe the port, it may be something for you very different because of your role. I just wondered, whether there was a personal 5G use case that you're quite invested in and interested in, or quite proud to shout about, really. I guess questions both of you, maybe different answers.
So the one I'm probably most excited about at the moment is the use case that the Royal Air Force are putting in place now into, we're going to do some connection of a private 5G for them as a proof of concept inside some hangars. And what that's going to do is it's going to be used to help them where they do aircraft maintenance to be able to potentially do remote aircraft maintenance and actually to be able to look for anomalies through scanning machinery and so forth, with mechanical arms as well as sensors. So lots of really exciting stuff going on there. But the reason why that's exciting is because it is all about moving human beings up the value chain. It's about the dull stuff, the repetitive stuff, and the things, frankly, where things can sometimes get missed by human beings being taken over by machines. And I think the benefits for that are about optimization, safety, efficiency. There are so many benefits out of it, so I'm very excited about where the Air Force are going with that.
I think for me, there's a couple I would mention. So one is a kind of a bunch of use cases that we've delivered for Manufacturing Technology Centre in Coventry, for Worcester Bosch, and actually for Lincoln University, who are developing agritech. And all three of those institutes are using a use case which is effectively an AGV with a robotic arm mounted on it and some cameras that is linked back to an AI ML type solution, which in the manufacturing industry allows them to have this dynamic manufacturing floor, and that's where that industry is moving to. So having a robotic arm that can move around and it can learn to do things and do different functions is really exciting. And you can we've got those three use cases that we've delivered today. You can see there's thousands of different applications that you could put that type of technology to. So I think that's really exciting. And then the other one is a project we've been doing in partnership with many other technology providers, which is with Williams Hyperbat. So they wanted they have a digital twin that they use for CAD design, collaborative CAD design, but they're actually all connected via XR. So where they've got two different locations, they have their engineers connected with XR headsets, and we're using kind of split rendering with the GPUs, millimeter wave radio. This is really kind of cutting edge stuff. But actually we've delivered that project and it was very successful, and you can see the real power there of having people in different locations, being in this kind of virtual world, working on a CAD design on a digital twin and getting the feedback in real time. So there's some exciting stuff that's coming out, and certainly in terms of connectivity, millimeter wave 5G was key in terms of that really low latency, so you don't get the seasickness effect, and also the high throughput of data that you need.
I think an important point you make there, Lou, is that working with our partners as well, because it isn't just about us doing this ourselves, and I think this is creating great levels of collaboration with partners. And that might be the partners who are helping us put devices on top of the network, people who are helping us to deliver the network. For example, security products from Fortinet. We're really working hard with them now. It's really great to have this whole ecosystem of people we're working with.
Absolutely, and it's a change of direction for MNOs. Particularly in this world. partnerships is really key to build out that ecosystem and the end-to-end solutions. And it's all about having the capability to deliver end-to-end solutions.
Brilliant, thank you. So the app's still not working, so we're going to try and go to the floor again. Has anyone else got a question within the room that they'd like to ask? I can come around with a microphone if need be. No, I've got one myself actually. So I went to Seattle to interview T-Mobile, and they had a little 5G. It was almost like a sort of a showcase, really, I suppose you would say, like in terms of all the kind of possibilities that you can do with it. Has BT got anything like this in terms of that people can kind of turn up and have a little play?
So there's one which is about half a mile from where we're sitting right now in our shiny new offices in 1 Bram at Aldgate. There is a technology showcase on the first floor, and there are places where you can see the benefits of some of the BT technologies. And really what it's designed to be is a taster for what goes on up at Adastral Park, our huge R&D centre up near Ipswich. So that's the main place it happens, but there is a smaller tech showcase there, and there's certainly ways to come and see that and have an understanding of what sort of R&D we're doing there. And we show it to customers a lot, and they're really excited by that. I took some customers around it 2 days ago.
Fantastic.
I think outside of that as well, I mentioned the Manufacturing Technology Centre in Coventry. I don't know if anybody's been there before. It's a huge institute, state-funded. These guys are developing the future operational technology for the manufacturing industry. So we delivered a 5G private network there, and that is also a showcase for us. So we do take customers there. I mean, it's a hugely impressive facility, but they can actually see these robotic arms mounted on the AGVs in action on a product line. And also, John mentioned Lark Hill. We did a demonstrator at Lark Hill where we showed off lots of different 5G use cases, but we actually used what we call a pop-up 5G private network to do that. So that particular solution is mounted within a trailer. It's got a 16-meter mast. It allows us to provide a big 5G private network footprint, and then we can connect that to different application servers, which is what we did on site and demoed live all these 5G use cases running over a 5G private network.
Fantastic. And obviously you talk about partnerships. Now, obviously there's a clear partnership between defence and BT, but are there any other major partners that we'd sort of be familiar with that you're sort of very invested in at BT, both in terms of, in terms of the actual development of 5G in itself, in terms of, because I think that there's almost a symposium that with a number of people involved in it that sort of sit there and kind of work out how the technology actually works for everyone, it seems, and people like Qualcomm, I guess, are involved in that kind of thing. And
so we have, when we have partners who are kind of in our supply chain, that the sorts you'd expect me to say, Fortinet, Cisco, Palo Alto, etc. But actually, I think in many ways some of our exciting partnerships are those people who we want to converge networks with, because what BT wants to do is to make sure we are genuinely converging networks, and that's what my customers need. They don't need 5G necessarily in isolation. So a good example of this would be OneWeb. So they're a UK company now with low Earth orbit satellites. We might well need satellite backhaul for some remote instances of 5G. And they're the sorts of exciting initiatives where we'd be able to pull those together. Also on other programs we're working with a large US satellite-based company called Viasat, who fly geostationary satellites. So we do have lots of really big strategic partners with whom we'll do converged networks. We see ourselves as being the integrator, in many ways the security and service provider for that. So that's the kind of the two ways we can look at our partnerships, from sort of bottom up and top down, if you like.
Yeah. Would you like to add anything to that, Lou, in terms of partnerships? I'm gonna ask. I always like to ask a childlike question, as is my nature.
They're normally the hardest ones to answer.
Well, yeah, exactly. Why is the sky blue? But this one is more along the lines of. Obviously the title of this presentation is More Than Smartphones. So, in the future, I saw a quote the other day, I forget who it was from, so forgive me, but it's essentially talking about the fact that actual smartphones, little devices, in handheld, will themselves become obsolete at some point in the relative near future, and what this then leads to in terms of whether it leads to different kinds of wearables, potentially things like implants and stuff. And whilst it sounds quite science fiction, do you see there being any kind of truth in this in terms of like what will the smartphone become defunct in 10 years?
So my personal take is I don't think it'll be defunct. I don't think it's an either or answer. I think that more devices are being brought in, and VR and AR headsets would be an example where they are coming in to augment rather than to replace. I think that people's driving experience in cars will start moving further and further towards what a helicopter pilot or an airline pilot gets, with heads-up displays and so forth. So I think those technologies will come, but I'd be very surprised if, certainly looking at my children, to talk about childlike questions, who are not really children anymore, but the odds of getting a smartphone out of their hand or pocket for the next 10 years is pretty slim.
Yeah, I would agree. I remember when media pads became mainstream, tablets, and there was several reports saying that nobody would have a computer, a laptop with a keyboard, in the next 5 years. Everybody will be working, using tablets, and that was probably about 10 years ago. So I think sometimes there is some hype. It's all about the interface, isn't it? I completely agree with John. We will augment it with lots of cool technology and have different types of interfaces and ways we can interact. But it's difficult to see how you would get rid of, a screen that you can interact with.
I think, there's always this talk about trust, in particular with things like artificial intelligence, this kind of stuff. But there's a high level of trust involved in being able to sit in a car and let it drive itself as you are in your meeting or eating a sandwich. But I suppose in many ways we're already doing that with a lot of technologies that we already use, I suppose, in terms of maybe if we're flying or even trains that are driverless trains and stuff. We just don't even think about it. So do you think that will be the way with cars and automotive, in terms of it'll just become a thing? Well, of course there's no driver.
Yeah, I think there's two ways to answer that question. One is from a technology perspective, and as the quality of service improves, the coverage improves, some of the amazing things that we've already talked about today around what 5G offers, then the technology is absolutely enabling that to happen. There's also a psychological answer to that as well, the other way to consider it, which is the level of willingness of a user, a consumer, to put confidence in the technology, and that can sometimes be slower than the rate of the technology move. So I think this is about human behavior, culture, and therefore I think that in many ways will be the thing that slows down the development and rollout of the technology. But it will come. I think more and more of this will come, and the human beings will allow the machines to take over a bit more.
It always sounds ominous when someone says that, though, doesn't it? But trust in the machines. Well, thank you both. That's all we've got time for. But ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to give a hand for,
thank you.
for John and Lee.